Okay, the presentation that I posted in your LMS is titled The Gettysburg Address, which is a speech and also a film clip that is titled Saving Lincoln. So today we're going to be talking about a very famous speech that occurred during the American Civil War. I want to remind you that the unit's title is Finding Common Ground, and the essential question is, how can we overcome our differences? And I cannot think of any other moment in the history of the United States when there were bigger differences than this one, because people were actually shooting at each other. There was a civil war, and there was a civil war that was causing the United States to break apart. As a matter of fact, it was in the middle of breaking apart. And this civil war was fought between the federal government of the United States of America and a group of several southern states that were calling themselves the Confederate States of America. They decided to break away from the Union in 1860, and the federal government, during that time, the president was Abraham Lincoln. He said, no, that is not happening. The big and long-standing disagreement over the northern states and the southern states was the issue of slavery. Slavery was a thing during this time. The Civil War has several causes because the southern states depended on slaves for free labor that they received, which minimized their cost when they were producing things like cotton and things like that. And they were against slavery for that reason, among other reasons. And the election of Abraham Lincoln as a president was something that did not sit right with the southern states. Very similar to today, you have some people that say that Biden is not the president. They don't like the fact that he won during that time. Some people did not like the fact that Abraham Lincoln had won the election. And then the issue of slavery, which was really the linchpin of it all. So Abraham Lincoln, when you think about presidents in the United States of America, usually who come to our mind are two presidents, George Washington, and we also think in Abraham Lincoln, because they are great presidents. There's a debate on who was the greatest of them all, but there's no denying how important Abraham Lincoln was as a president. He kept the country together. He kept the country from splitting in two, and he finally paid with his life. So one of the most famous speeches in American history was one that he gave at the National Cemetery at Gettysburg, Pennsylvania in 1863. Why did he give it there? Because there was a very bloody battle that occurred there, one of the deadliest battles in the Civil War. How many people died? Well, I would say that somewhere around 50,000 people died that day. 28,000 Confederate soldiers and 23,000 Union soldiers. And there were like mountains and mountains of dead people. It was horrific. And what they did was make a mass grave, because burying all those people separately was a tall order, was not going to happen. So the president went there to dedicate this national cemetery. He gave the speech. A short time later, unfortunately, near the end of the war, President Lincoln was assassinated by an actor named John Wilkes Booth. While he was watching a show, the actor sneaked behind him and shot him behind the head, killing the president. However, President Lincoln is remembered for his dedication to the ideals of freedom and equality. And this speech that you guys are going to be reading today, if you haven't read it already, continue to inspire people up to this day. When we read the speech, it's important that you pay attention to how the speech emphasizes the importance of ending the war. You know, when you think of a speech that he was giving, he was in the middle of a war, You imagine him probably saying horrific things about his enemies, about the South. And the speech was nothing like that. The speech was not in a way that anybody, I think, would imagine that speech to be. He gave a very conciliatory speech because he wanted the speech to bring people together. Again, he used the speech as an opportunity to bring people together, to find common ground, not as an opportunity to demonize the people from the South. Something that you're going to notice about speeches is that they contain a lot of repetition and something called parallelism. Speeches are messages that are meant to be delivered orally. In other words, you write the speech, but that's not the end of the speech. The end result is the delivery given by a good speaker. They will incorporate something called repetition, which is the use of keywords or key phrases. My question to you guys is, why should someone use repetition in a speech? Why do we have repetition? Things are repeated because they are important, but something else that you see in speeches is a device known as parallelism, which is the use of similar patterns of words, phrases, and sentences. This is used to create a certain rhythm and evocate emotions. So sometimes we use these devices to make people feel. We don't want people to just hear. We don't want people to just think. We don't want people to just feel. We want people to do all those things. And we also use something called the understatement, which is a technique that creates emphasis by saying less about something than what is true. In other words, we try to make something less important than it is. And why do we do that? To create humor or to create satire. So sometimes we have to be serious, but sometimes we have to be a little bit funny to keep people interested. When we read the Gettysburg Address, you're going to notice repeated words because they are important. You're also going to notice parallel clauses. You're going to see clauses and phrases such as, we are engaged, we are met, we have come. I want you to think about how the president uses repetition, parallelism, and understatement to advance his purpose. Before we go to the vocabulary words, I would like to read the address. Do you have the book with you?
Yes.
Okay. So, oh, I'm sorry, I pressed the wrong button. There are some critical vocabulary words that you guys need to define and learn. They are conceive, detract, resolve, perish, enforce, entity, internal, and presume. The assessment that you're going to be doing and uploading include check your understanding, critical vocabulary, vocabulary strategy, and language conventions, parallel structures, which is in your book. I have a clip here, guys, from a movie called Saving Lincoln, where you're going to see an actor reenacting the speech given at the Gettysburg Cemetery dedication. So here we go. I hope that you can see this. Okay, hold on a second. Okay, let me see if I can share this video with you. And here we go. Here we go. Okay, this is kind of slow. Share. Okay, can you see this, guys? Okay, here we go.
The president of the United States.
Resistance to the war was growing. Mr. Lincoln needed to reinvigorate the people, to explain to them, and perhaps himself, why this endless plague of war must continue.
77 years ago, our fathers brought forth upon this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now, we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation, or any nation, so conceived and so dedicated, can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they here gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain. That this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom. And that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
We're going to compare across the genres. Have you seen a Venn diagram before, guys? This is a Venn diagram. Have you ever worked with a Venn diagram before?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Can anybody tell me what the Venn diagram is used for?
To compare or tear apart differences from two different subjects.
It is used to compare. It is also used to contrast. Remember that comparing and contrasting are two different things. When we are comparing, we're looking for similarities. When we're contrasting, we're looking for differences. You guys read the speech titled The Gettysburg Address, and you guys heard the speech in a clip called Saving Lincoln. What you're going to write at each side are the differences. You're going to contrast the written text with hearing the speech. In the middle, you're going to compare. In other words, you're going to find similarities. Here, I am giving you already an example of a similarity between the Gettysburg Address and Saving Lincoln. I gave you one, give me one more. So you can write like two differences at each side and one more similarity between the speech and the written text and what you heard, the oral speech. And that will be